Welcome back to the SDG Warriors Podcast. I'm Simar Mahanti, the team lead and student coordinator of the SDG Warriors. We're a team of passionate student changemakers and STEMness on a mission to meet the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, leveraging the power of STEM education and 21st century skills. Brought to you by us SDG Warriors, this podcast features inspiring stories from edu heroes and STEM experts from around the world. This is ideal for anyone interested in STEM, education, and social impact. And our podcast aims to provide enriching learning experiences and drive positive change in local, global, and digital communities. In all our previous episodes, we have explored the stories behind incredible edu heroes. But today's guest arrives with the whole storyboard in hand, ready to sprinkle a little magic on every frame. Because if our childhood was a script, our edu hero has spent his career directing the scenes that defined it with humor and heart, infusing our earliest memories all about stories around friendship. So, from the cozy corners of ToddWorld to the swashbuckling decks of Captain Jake and the Neverland Pirates, from the magical land of Carolot to the iconic Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. Today's guest is Mr. Jeff Gordon, who is an animation director and Emmy-winning animation director at Walt Disney Animation Studios. And his work reminds us that the stories that we grow up with quietly, they actually sketch the blueprints for who we become, and they're carefully drawn one frame at a time behind the scenes by amazing humans. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Jeff Gordon. Mr. Gordon, it's truly an honor to have you with us today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be on. Thank you for having me.
So awesome. Before we dive into today's conversation, to help our listeners audibly visualize the entire experience, can you tell us where are you located? What is the weather like outside? And what can you see from your window right now?
Right now, I'm in the backyard in my office. I have a backyard office, and I'm actually looking at a brick wall and a big oak tree, big California oak tree. I'm located in Los Angeles, more specifically in the San Fernando Valley in a place called Sherman Oaks.
That sounds awesome, Mr. Gordon. Back home here in Bangalore, India, it's Friday night. Yeah, and after some bright sunshine, it had finally rained earlier today. And outside my window, I can actually see the folks who are playing in the rain, the drizzles, and in my the folks in my neighborhood, they still haven't removed their festival lights. So the
Uh,
gradient of orange and fuchsia and blue, all of them merge together, and they are shining on the wet road, and it really forms an aesthetic scene. So
nice.
yes,
It's
awesome.
beautiful. And the weather here is like you'd expect in Southern California. They always say it's always sunny in California, Southern California, and that's what it is. It's sunny this morning. It's temperature's beautiful. It's probably about 70 to 75 degrees. Almost always really beautiful here.
Sunny side up.
Yeah.
And now that we have set the stage, let's begin with the first question. Mr.
Yes.
Gordon, can you walk us through your creative process when starting a new episode, from the initial idea to the final storyboard or direction?
Absolutely. So, first of all, I don't write the scripts, but sometimes they ask me if I have any input. But for the most part, the writers and the head writer take care of that, and the executive producer influences the scripts a lot as well, because the executive producer is heavily involved in the entire process, so they have a lot to say. But as a director, basically, when I get the script, I read it a few times, and I start looking for um, things that are in the script that, I start to visualize what the shots will look like, what the scenes will look like, or if I have any ideas on gags that I can include. Sometimes when I'm reading something, it may not be written in there, but I visualize a gag, something funny that could happen, especially when there's a lot of dialogue. It's important dialogue, and we need to hear it, but it might be kind of lengthy, right? So you might I always try to think of, well, what can I have our characters doing during that dialogue that won't interrupt the flow of the story, but at the same time is visually interesting. It might be funny or just a little bit quirky, something offbeat or something unusual, as long as it doesn't take away from the story, because you want the viewer to be engaged during the entire thing, and you don't want them to turn the channel, right, or turn it off and try something else. So you want to keep their minds engaged in what they're watching. So after I go through the script, I'll draw thumbnail sketches right on the script. All my ideas go down. Sometimes I'll just draw it on paper. Sometimes I'll come up with a gag and literally almost animate it. That doesn't happen often, but if I want to send the message to the storyboard artist, like, this is what I was thinking, and it would be really funny, and here's why, and I can show him exactly, or her, the exact timing of the scene and what I'm thinking. But for the most part, it's just drawing sketches on the script, and then from that point, I do the handout with the storyboard artist, and I go through exactly what I was thinking. And then usually the board artist, they should, if they almost always do, thankfully, read the script ahead of time, so they understand what we're talking about. Um, and then I include their ideas. We bounce ideas off of each other, and we come up with how we want this to look. Because a lot of times when you're reading a script, the writers are interested in the story, and that's their job, is to tell a good story, right? But they don't always understand the mechanics of the characters in terms of where they're positioned, and then that's not really their job. So that's our job as the director and the board artist, to kind of figure out where to place the characters. And so sometimes we have to change some things in the script in order to make those visuals happen. um, and I don't want to get into the specifics too much, because I could go on forever about it. But basically, it's our job to make the script work, right? And make sure that the story is being told the way that the writer intended. Um, so that's pretty much it. So the question is, from initial idea to final storyboard. So then so the board artist goes, and they take usually like 2 or 3 weeks to rough out the story, which is we're doing 22-minute episodes on Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, but there's 2 board artists for each episode. So each board artist is responsible for approximately 11 minutes. So they get about 2 or 3 weeks to rough something out, and then they show it to me, and I mark it up with notes, and any additional ideas that I have, I'll write it into the storyboard using Storyboard Pro. And from there, they take it back and they do the notes, and they clean it up then. And then I get the clean storyboard, and then I'll put notes on that board and then send that back. And then they'll adjust those things. And then they send the clean revised board back to me. And from there, we pretty much, go right into animatics. Sometimes there's a few tweaks based on the changes we made, but then we do the animatic, and then from there, it goes, when you finally get the final animatic, which takes a few rounds of notes, then we send it overseas to India, to Bangalore, and we have you guys animate it.
And wow, that gives me so much more perspective into the magic, all the magic which goes behind the scenes to make the characters that we truly love and cherish. And it's really fascinating to hear that the final product, it's really a discovery of the perfect first draft, and not only the execution of it. And it reminds me so much about the engineering projects that we do in college as students. Like, we
Okay.
start with a simple idea, we have a blueprint, and we are constantly building upon each other's ideas with different perspectives. But the real solutions, they actually emerge inside the lab when we are building the prototype and we see what actually works. And the idea that the story evolves through collaboration and iteration, that actually takes away the pressure, to have a flawless idea from the start. And it actually reframes creativity as like a process of listening and responding to the work as it comes to life, rather than just forcing a single vision into a page. And
Yeah.
yes, and well, like that process of evolution, it seems even more complex when you're not starting from a blank page, but
Yeah.
with characters that the entire world already knows and loves. So, Mr. Gordon, while
Yes.
reviving beloved childhood icons, whether Mickey Mouse, Minnie, Donald, or the Care Bears, how do you honor their timeless spirit while reimagining stories and ideas that feel fresh, relevant, and inspiring for today's new generation?
Well, that's really more the job of the writers, but as a director, I just want to make sure that we keep the characters true to who they are, right? So Mickey Mouse is a very he's like what we call everyman. Everybody likes Mickey. He's a very nice character. He's never angry. He's never mad. At least in the preschool version. Sometimes, some of the wacky 2D stuff that has come out, he can get angry, right? They take Mickey to another level, another place. But for us, we really have to be true to the original character and make him really sweet, especially for our preschool audience. It's very important. Minnie Mouse also very sweet and just loves animals, loves all the other characters, and she also loves to bake and help people, and Daisy is similar. It's interesting. Daisy is just a little bit wackier, but she's also really nice and sweet, and but she has a little wackier personality than than Minnie does. And then Donald is probably our only character in the preschool series that can get angry, right? So he can get angry sometimes or frustrated. Probably that's probably a better word is to say he can get really frustrated because a lot of things happen to him physically, that we can't do with Mickey or Minnie. And then Goofy, well, everybody loves Goofy, and you can take him almost anywhere. And if you think when dealing with Goofy, if you think that, oh, that's too wacky for Goofy, you're probably wrong. It's probably not wacky enough. It's not silly enough, right? He can be such a silly character, very relatable to kids, because he walks, kind of goofy, and he just has a very lovable personality, and he just thinks differently than all the other characters. Like and Mickey and the Roadster Racers, his car was basically a bathtub, like dragster car, like a drag car, right? And that's pretty goofy. And it had a shower head that came over above the seat, and it was just silly, right? When you can do that with Goofy, you would never do that with Mickey. Mickey has a very beautiful little roadster car. It's like a little sporty car, and it's very nice. Daisy has a car with flowers on it, and because she's all about daisies, she loves daisies. And Chip and Dale actually had a car made out of acorns, like these giant shaped, acorn shaped car. It was beautiful. So just keeping those personalities true to who were originally, and making sure you don't stray from that is the best I can do as a director. And usually they're written that way for us. There's an occasion when there might be some dialogue that you know that does seem a little bit off for that character, right? Not often, but then the voice actor who plays that character, they know the personality of the characters better than anybody because they play them every day, and they will have input sometimes during the records and say, can we change this dialogue to say this, because Daisy would never say that, or Mickey wouldn't say that. um, the voice director does that. They'll make changes on the fly, or they'll change lines and give one line to a different character because it sounds something like Goofy would say, for example, and not Donald, right? So keeping true to the characters, and making sure that everyone down the line is doing the same thing. So the voice director, the storyboard artist has to draw the characters in a way that makes them look like the original. They act in the way that they would act. And the executive producer, which I left out in the first process, which is absolutely important, that we show everything to the executive producer, and then eventually the channel or the network, and they have to approve all of it as well. So there's a lot of eyeballs looking at these things and making sure that these characters are true to who they really are.
And that's truly a thoughtful approach, Mr. Gordon,
Yeah.
staying true to the characters themselves. You're essentially acting like a cultural translator, because
Yeah.
this sounds less like a reinvention and more like a conversation between generations. You're
Yeah.
ensuring that the why behind each and every character's appeal endures. And even
Yeah.
if what they're doing, it changes, it really makes me think that the biggest challenge is not how modern they look now, but ensuring that their core values, like friendship, like optimism or
Yes.
resilience, they shine through in a way that actually feels authentic to kids today, because it's all about relatability. It's like
Yes.
a big responsibility, I can imagine, like keeping the soul of the character intact while giving them a new voice for the future as well. And a huge part of that voice, especially in preschool animation, is weaving in educational elements without losing the fun. Television is often purely seen for entertainment, yet
Yes.
your work on interactive music filled shows like Mickey Mouse Clubhouse is educational. So, what is your core directing strategy for weaving learning concepts like counting and shapes into the narrative so that the episode feels like a fun, participatory adventure rather than a classroom lesson?
Well, I have to say that our writers and our head writer, Kim, she does an amazing job. They all do an amazing job of incorporating those things into the scripts. So, so for example, I had, without giving any too much away, I probably shouldn't say this, but I had a, let me put it in a very cryptic way. I had a story where Daisy had to count these certain animals. She lost these animals and she had to count them. So, and so they call for a special, the mouse capel. The mouse capel arrives and finds these different animals, right? These animals. And so each time she finds an animal, we count the number. So she needed to find four of them. And so the mouse capel found one, and then we see the number one on the screen, right? So, and the characters always look at the audience and ask them for their help. So, will you, like, for example, will you help us count the sheep? Or whatever the example is. And so they count them, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's how, the writers incorporate it. And then we just have to make sure as board artists that we follow through on that. Um, and of course, the executive producer and the network is always checking for that to make sure that all of those learning points are included. But one of the big things that you touched on already, and these are timeless lessons, which is what I think Mickey Mouse is kind of known for, especially the preschool series, telling stories about things that are true now and will be forever, like being nice to other people, being kind to animals, helping someone in need, being there for someone just to listen. These are things that I'm never gonna. These things don't change when society changes. These are just human conditions that we all need and want and need to learn how to work together as a society, whether it's in India or in the United States. It doesn't matter, right? So that's the beauty of Mickey Mouse and Mickey's Clubhouse, is that these are stories that the entire world can relate to. Everyone in the world understands, you know, what it feels like to be lonely and have one of your friends come over to help you, and they want that. So it's things that kids can relate to, and adults as well. So that's how we do it.
And I think that's the very difference between being lectured versus being invited into solving a problem. When a lesson is the key to solving a puzzle in a game or a story, it
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like a lesson anymore. It feels like a sort of power up. And I remember reminiscing about the science games that I used to play during my childhood in the previous episode. One of those games was about recycling, and as I learned more about it, about the three R's, it was not because what the screen told me, the instructions or the lines, but it was because I had to sort the items correctly to win the game. You're turning the
Right.
audience from passive viewers into active participants in the
Yes.
character's success. And that's there in the Mickey universe, that's there in the Dora universe, that's even there in
Yes.
the Teletubbies universe, where the learning, it becomes an empowering tool and not just a normal chore.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And that's exactly what we try to do is draw the audience in to keep them actively engaged, not only in the story, but learning the lessons that we're trying to teach. So they want to become part of that. And it's a wonderful thing when it's done well. It's really amazing. Kids remember it. We hear from people all the time saying, "Oh, I grew up with that show. I love this episode where this happened." You're probably one of those people.
Yes. And like that truly makes me wonder that the principle of seamless integration, it seems super important, especially when the clock is ticking and you
Yes,
only have a few minutes to tell a whole story, and
yes,
especially in today's generation of shorts, of reels, of TikToks. So
yeah,
Mr. Gordon, in your 3-minute shorts like Mickey's Hot Diggity Dog Tales
yes,
or Chip and Dale's Nutty Tales, you must create a complete narrative using precise visuals and comic timing to make the audiences laugh. So, how do
yes.
you approach humor, comic timing, and visuals in such a tight format to make each and every shot memorable?
That is an excellent question. And I have to first say that though working on those shorts were some of the most challenging and some of the most rewarding things I've ever worked on. And I'm so proud of all of those shorts. Um, we would get scripts that would be probably a minute too long, and we would have to find, and we're talking about, cutting it down to 2 minutes. So let's say that all the dialogue came in and just reading the dialogue was at 3 minutes. So, like, how are we going to make this story work? Well, it's amazing when you really take a deep dive into a script and a story. You can start eliminating a line here and a line there, or you can overlap dialogue sometimes. You have to find, and to be honest with you, that actually helped us because we got rid of all the stuff that wasn't necessary, and we had condensed it into the absolute essential parts of the story, including all of the gags. So, making the gags really work was next to the story was number one. Story's number one, and then how funny can we make these things and tell the story? And that challenge was one of the best things that I've ever worked on. I just love to do that, and it's so rewarding if you start with a 3 minute script, and you boil it down all the way to 2 minutes, and you have all this action happening on top of action. You might have two or three things happening at one time, but still making that work. It's a very difficult thing. Usually we're very linear in our storytelling, and we have to, especially with a young audience, we want to do, okay, this happens and then this happens and then this happens. But what if we have this and this happen, and that leads to this, and then these other two things are happening? So we have to find ways to layer action and dialogue and still make it work. And if you watch those, especially the Chippendale's Nutty Tales, but also the Hot Diggity Dog Tales. We did the same thing on those. In fact, Diggity Dog Tales was even a shorter format. I believe that the Chippendale's Nutty Tales was 2.5 minutes, and Hot Diggity Dog Tales was 2 minutes. So we really had to find ways to cut down things. And it again, it's one of the most rewarding things to figure all those things out and then see it animated and have it work. It's one of the most fun things I've ever done.
Wow, and that sounds like joke engineering. It's amazing,
Yes.
like how much.
That's a good phrase. I'm going to use that. Joke engineering. I love it.
Yes. And like, I think like the amount of discipline it takes to create something that feels so spontaneous and fun, it's like super fascinating. And it's actually, if you think about it, it's like a paradox. The more constrained the format, the more
Yes.
precise and creative you have to be. And this actually reminds me about
Yes.
this very podcast. Like whenever we invite a guest, we have we have over 50 questions. Once
Yeah.
we had over 200 questions, and then we go through different processes. We
Yeah.
cut it down to, let's say, if it's 200, we cut it down to 50,
Yeah.
then 30, then 20, and then,
Yeah.
because we have a strict time that we need to follow, and the guest is not there with you forever, and the listeners as well. So how much meaning can you provide to your listeners in, let's say, an hour or so? All of this depends upon how creatively you frame the questions, just like how
Yeah.
creatively you engineer the shots.
Yes.
And the more concentrated it is, it's like distilling an idea into its purest and
Yeah.
its most funniest scenes.
Absolutely. It's exactly what we try to do. And I've noticed your questions too, that you've done that with your questions. You've kind of layered multiple things in one question. That's how you did it. You do the same thing we do.
Yes, because honestly, we have so many, and
Yeah.
to get the true meaning of it, we need to include all of them.
Yeah.
But there's no way, but we do need to convey them, so what we do is we merge them.
Yeah.
That's creativity.
That's good. I know that's great. You guys are really doing well. I mean, I'm really impressed with everything.
Thank you so much. But that challenge of distillation, I think
Yes.
it must be even greater when a character cannot rely on witty dialogue to express themselves. So, Mr. Gordon, what techniques do you use to convey story and emotion through non speaking characters like Pluto, especially in a brief runtime?
Well, that's actually uh, what has kept me in storyboarding all these years is posing out characters that have to, convey an emotion, whether it's sadness, happiness, curiosity, courage. The list goes on, and there's just so many different expressions, facial expressions, and body language. As a director, that I've studied and tried to learn, so that whether the character is speaking or not, they still have to convey that emotion physically. So we want the characters. I mean, really, some of the best animation ever made is you should be able to turn the sound down or off and still be able to kind of tell what's going on, at least emotionally, with the characters. If you can't, then you got a problem with the posing. So, if it's someone that's really sad, you don't need to hear them say they're sad. You should be able to see it on their face, because the face is the hardest thing to get right for animators. Face, hands, and feet, hardest things. So the hands and feet are just physically difficult to draw. The face um, is difficult to draw correctly, but to draw the emotion and to really capture that takes a lot of studying. And I don't know if you've ever watched any, documentaries about old Disney animators or any of the old animators, but they always have a mirror on their desk, a little round mirror, and they're constantly looking in the mirror and trying to create that expression that they want to draw with their own face. So they're looking to see how their eyebrow goes up, or how, what maybe it's just the corner of their mouth goes up a little bit, when they're a little bit happy. That reminds me of, um, one of my favorite movies of all time. It's the first movie I ever saw, was Jungle Book. And so at the end, Mowgli goes to the river, right? And he looks across the river and he sees this little girl, and he's got the cutest smile you ever saw. And it's just out the one side of his mouth goes up a little bit. And you can tell he's totally smitten with this girl. And he's going to go back to living in the village, because he tried to escape into the jungle and be by himself or with the animals. And then well, he grew up in the jungle. That's right. But he goes to this village. He doesn't really know that he's a human being, right? So, but he goes and he's across the river from this village, and he sees this girl who's like who looks like him, but she's not quite like him, right? So the expression that they gave Mowgli was just beautiful, and that's kind of like my standard. If I can make anything even close to that, I'll figure I'm successful if I can capture that kind of emotion. And it's challenging to do on a TV time and budget, but that's what inspires me. Those are the things. And so it really is all about studying, watching a lot of other animation. I've read books on body language. I've seen animation books on, that just have lots of different expressions. It's a lot of studying, but most of all, it's, I think the more life experience you have as well, the more you can convey those expressions. And so I feel like the older I get, the better I'm getting at conveying those emotions on the characters.
Absolutely. And I think communication, it goes so much beyond words. It's all about the characters' actions and intentions. And when I
Yes.
think about it in our own lives, in our natural world, all the time, we can tell if a friend is upset or
Yep.
excited just by the posture or the way
Yes.
that they walk into the classroom. You're essentially directing an entire performance using
Yep.
the universal language of emotion and physicality, and
Yes.
that's really important for children to develop as well. And a great story is not the one which needs to be explained. It needs to be felt, and
Yes.
characters like Pluto, characters like Mowgli, with
Yes.
just a certain length of this work, they are
Yep.
masters of making us feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. It inspires me. It still inspires me to this day. Yep.
And like that focus on unique personalities is something that I see across many of your projects, especially those with diverse characters.
Yeah.
Across projects like ToddWorld, Captain Jake, and the Care Bears, you've consistently balanced an ensemble of unique diverse characters. So Mr. Gordon, how did you leverage their distinct personalities and differences to highlight the themes of diversity, collaboration, and problem solving, while ensuring that each one's individual voices stood out in the animation and story?
Wow. See, this is one of those big questions that you packed into one question.
Yes.
Um, it's just having a constant awareness of each character, who they are. Um, and a lot of that's, the writer's responsible for. Not only screen time to make sure that each character is involved in the story, um, but it's also our job as well as directors, because there might be a situation where a character is not talking. Maybe we need to be on these other characters, and they're talking about something. Um, but there might be a really good reason to cut to another character who's very it was really impacted by their dialogue. Whatever they're saying, it's really important to them. So we need to see their expression and how they're reacting to this dialogue so maybe we cut to them, or we have a wider shot where that character is included, and we do have that character do something that draws our attention to them, so we can watch them to see how they're reacting. Um, so, but in terms of leveraging personalities and differences to deepen themes of diversity, again, that's probably specific thing is probably more up to the writers and making sure that that's included in the script. Um, yeah. So diversity is something that's been, a buzzword in the industry for quite a while now, and it's so deeply ingrained into the stories already. It would be unusual to see a show that did not have that. It's like a necessary thing to include for many good reasons, right? For the same reasons we talked about earlier. What does it feel like to be left out? And we can tell those stories and show those emotions, and um, it's really an important thing. And whether, you know, I, I just think that everyone can relate to that in some way. Everyone has felt left out in some way, no matter who they are. Whether society thinks that they have special privileges because of their race or their gender or whatever, they still have other things that they have to deal with. And it's really important to tell all of the stories. If we truly want to be diverse, we have to tell all of the stories from every angle, every person's perspective at some point, and everyone's got a story. So I think Disney Junior does a fantastic job of that. I know some of the other companies do as well, like Warner Brothers and as well as Nickelodeon, and they all do a really good job of making sure that everyone's voice is heard. And it's really, I think having that become such a big part of the industry has actually helped the industry in a lot of ways. It's helped tell new stories instead of rehashing old ones. And it's really important for the children that are watching, that they feel they can relate to the characters and they understand those feelings. So
And I think that's a very beautiful way to frame it, Mr. Gordon. It's all about making diversity mechanically essential to the entire plot. So that, and introducing it at such a young age is honestly a magical thing, one of the best things that you can do for a child. And I think that the perfect model for teamwork, and I think many of our listeners can relate to this. We can see it in the group projects that we do in school. You see
yeah,
one person is very good at doing research, but then that person is not the best at speaking. But then they have a friend who's brilliant at presenting ideas and speaking their mind. And the third is amazing at organizing their work. It's like bringing your different people's superpowers together. And the project succeeds not, in spite of the differences, but because of
because of
them.
them, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, no,
And like
that's very well said. Much better than the way I said it.
I think that the shows like Care Bears, they actually teach that lesson so elegantly.
Yeah,
It's like you can relate to each one of those bears so well, like the sunshine bear, the rainbow bear, the rain bear. And a team of identical characters, they would fail, but a team where everyone brings something different to the table, I think
yes.
they can solve anything.
Well, that's a really good example because you didn't include Grumpy Bear in there, but he's a really important part of that team,
Yes.
and his personality is very important. And people that have different views like that are equally as important because they show a side and make you think about things that are that you may not have thought of, right? So if Grumpy is angry about something, maybe everyone else is not seeing what he's seeing, and so he may have just solved some huge problem because he gets grumpy, and that's all. You said it very well. When everyone has these different ideas and opinions and strengths, um, and skills, and you know it's fun to work on a show where that's exactly the way our crew is. We have everybody on the crew is highly skilled, and they have they're very skilled in different areas, right? But we all work together, and it comes together. But the one common thing we have is that everyone respects everyone. They
Yes.
respect that people are different than them because they know that they bring something to the table that they don't or they can't. And I really feel that way on our crew. We have a fantastic crew where everyone is respected and appreciated. That's a big part of it too. When you're being appreciated for what you bring to the table, it encourages you to do even better and do even more. It feels good to be wanted and needed for a show or anything that you're involved in. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's just like the six thinking hats. We have the black hat. And honestly,
Yeah.
whenever you're pointing out some problem in a thing which is going on, it should not be criticized
Yeah.
because you're preventing something major to be happening in the future by telling that to your team right now so that you can present your best work forward as a team
Yeah.
together.
That's exactly right. When someone seems like they have a negative attitude about something in the project, it really needs to be viewed as, okay, what are they really saying here? What it what potential problems could come from this if we move forward? It's a very important viewpoint to have because it could solve an issue, like you said, down the road that you didn't think of. Because no one if you don't have that person in the room, you didn't think of it.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. It helps you to see the entire thing from all the different lenses. And
Yes.
like Mr. Gordon, you've explored different ways of seeing the world, not just through the characters, but through animation styles themselves. Chloe's Closet blends 2D animation inside wardrobe fantasies with CG in the real world. So, how did the mix of animation styles influence your direction, and what creative benefits did you find in switching between the animated imagination segments and the real world CGI scenes?
Okay, that's actually a pretty simple one for me to answer. Um, the influence of direction was keeping it very simple. Chloe's Closet starts out usually in Chloe's bedroom, almost always. I think it does. All episodes start in her bedroom, which is all designed in a 2D world, and so it's nice and simple. Everything looks clean and beautiful and simple, and it's very flat and graphic. Um, but what that's all done intentionally so that when she chooses a costume out of her closet, then her imagination starts swirling. That's why we have that stardust swirling around the closet, because it's stirring her imagination. And then once she's wearing these costumes, and her friends are wearing these costumes, the entire world has opened up, and it's more colorful, it's three-dimensional, um, it's unlimited, right? In a 2D world, there's a lot of limitations. In a 3D world, you can do and go almost anywhere. And that was the whole point of going from 2D to a 3D world. At the same time, she's still 2D, and all of her friends are still 2D in this 3D world. So they don't change, but everything around them does. What they see changes, and what they view changes. Their whole world is different now because they're imagining. And that's what imagination does. It makes you don't change necessarily as a person, but everything around you changes, and what you see, what you visualize is completely different. And there's no limit to it because it's your imagination. So we did a lot of things in that show, um, that really, that we could do. It was such a beautiful show because we could go and do anything with these costumes, and it's so relatable to kids because when you ask a kid, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? You'll get, oh, fireman. I want to be ballet dancer. I want to be whatever, right? And you could just tell these stories that and then what our very very good story editor she was very good at taking these stories that were in this imagination and using that imagination to solve a problem that happened in the 2D world in her bedroom at the beginning, right? So it's a great thing for kids to learn that you can really use your imagination and think outside the box to solve your problems in the real world. It's a beautiful lesson, and it actually helped us tremendously, uh, creatively, to have this unlimited world in CG.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
imagination is limitless. That's
yeah,
a wonderful takeaway for our listeners today, especially our young listeners.
yeah,
You're using the medium itself to tell the story. And the change in the animation style is a way beyond aesthetics. It's like a thematic signal that tells the audience that, okay, now we are entering the world of pure imagination, which externalizes a child's internal world, their imagination.
yeah,
And that actually makes me think about how we also switch between different modes of thinking. You have the logical, the structured CG part of our brain, and
yeah,
then for homework, and then we have the free flowing creative 2D part for brainstorming, or even daydreaming. At the
yeah.
show's design, it actually validates both the ways of it to see the world through different lenses. which is an
Yeah.
essential part of life.
Yeah. True. Yep.
Awesome. So the idea of blending worlds also seems central to another one of your acclaimed projects. So Jakers blends Irish folklore with modern storytelling. So how did you incorporate local folklore elements in a way that felt authentic and engaging to a global audience?
Well, that uh, like every show, engaging to a global audience, it's always about the stories and the characters and making them those stories and emotions and feelings relatable, which we talked a lot about before. That's where you do it. All of the Irish folklore elements are just it's just another stage, you know. It could be anywhere, but those stories are relatable, you know, no matter if you're in Ireland, if you're in the US, if you're in India. The stories themselves are just relatable because they're human stories and people can relate to them. Um, but we were very fortunate to have a producer on our show who was from Ireland. So, and I think he's the one who came up with the name Jakers. I'm not sure about that, but I didn't know what Jakers was and never heard of it, but it's an expression in Ireland, and that's where it means like wow, basically, like Jakers, and that's amazing. So I didn't know that, but he brought that into the show, and that's how it became named Jakers. All the other Irish folklore elements that are in there, a lot of them were influenced by our producer, um, and because he lived there and he knew it. It was very authentic for him. Visually, the first director, his name was John Over. He flew to Wales, actually. He didn't go, I don't think he went to Ireland, but he definitely went to Wales to look at all the old castles, which is very similar to what they have in Ireland. Um, he took a lot of photo reference, and so he wanted to get as close as he could authentically to it. And ironically enough, I have a close friend who is Irish, and he's not in the industry at all, just somebody I know. And he said that he loved that show because it just reminded him so much of his childhood in Ireland. And so that was just a really good feeling to know that, that it worked on that level, that it was relatable, and he could relate to it, visually, and just because, and the stories as well. So uh, that was really nice to get that, um, to get that affirmation from him.
Shakers. It sounds like the key was to treat the folklore as a sort of natural backdrop for a
Yes.
universal human or a
Yes.
pig experience. And we might
Yes.
not know the specific legend, but we all know what it feels like to be brave. We all know what it feels like to be there for a friend who is feeling lonely, who is facing a tough situation, to
Yeah.
miss a friend or to learn a lesson. And actually, it reminds me stories from my own culture as well, because with all its specific rituals and symbols, it's ultimately all about love. It's about
Yeah.
duty or courage, things that anyone, anywhere in the world can understand and relate.
Absolutely. There was a story in Jakers where Fernie, he's a little bull character, where his goldfish dies, and it won a bunch of awards because it's so well written. I can't remember specifically who wrote it, but um, it was so beautifully done, and what it feels like to go through a grieving process, and how the other characters react to him, and how sympathetic and empathetic they were to him, how loving they were to him. It was, and for that to happen on such a essentially a preschool show. I mean, it's a little bit older, but um, to have something so deep and important told a story told in such a way that uh, that was so beautiful and caring. That's why it won a bunch of awards, because it's like, I don't think we should shy away from big serious issues or things from kids. They need to learn what that, or at least have an example to follow on how to possibly, that it's okay to grieve, um, that it's good to help other people when they're grieving, and to be a good friend to them. So that was such an important story that they told, and it was so well done because it could have gone wrong, right? It's a delicate balance of knowing exactly how to treat and write a story like that. But it was so well done. It won a bunch of awards, and that was a really special episode. And we had a few episodes like that. We touched on subjects that probably weren't seen very often in animation, and that's what made that show special. Is they went places that don't always go in a show for young kids.
Honestly, grief is such a powerful emotion, and I
Yeah.
think that a lot of adults themselves, they too struggle with dealing with it, but introducing such a delicate subject to a young audience, to preschoolers,
Yeah.
tying in concepts of empathy in it as well, it requires some real amount of talent. So yes, a huge shout out to all the writers, to all the people behind
Yes.
the magic who introduce such powerful concepts to our young learners.
Yes, absolutely.
And after shaping so many characters and stories over the years, Mr. Gordon, I can't help but wonder what the person behind the director's chair feels like. So, Mr. Gordon, what piece of your own personality lives hidden within your most famous characters? And how does that unseen personal mark contribute towards the leading invisible influence of your stories that you have on generations that they raise?
Oh boy, that's another huge question. But you know, part of my own personality, I think that every director that works in this business, they have to pour at least some of themselves into it, and they can't help it, right? I can't help uh, but contribute things to the show that feel right to me, um, and kind of reflect who I am as a person. Like I would not be comfortable with doing a show that was really violent, or I'm just that's not who I am. I would I'm not into like the adult animation that's done. I'm just that's not those aren't the stories I want to tell. That's not who I am. So my own personality in terms of that probably shows up all the time without even me knowing it, because I'm just trying to put emotions and expressions on these characters that I think feel right for them. But I can't help it in some ways. Sometimes I guess they do. It depends on which character I'm working on. So if um, it might be goofy, and sometimes I feel goofy and ridiculous, right? So it might be influencing him, or I guess I'm probably most relatable to Mickey. And I think that's why kids relate to Mickey, right? They want to have a really nice friend who doesn't judge them and is kind, right? That's who Mickey is. And I think that I like to think I'm like that. I know I'm not like that all the time, but most of the time I think I am kind to other people. So that definitely gets put into those characters, and makes it relatable. But you know what? I think we're all filled with different aspects of our personality. Sometimes I can get angry like Donald, or I can be goofy like Goofy, or I can be super sweet, and occasionally I'll bake something like Minnie. But yeah, I think that as a director, you can't help but pour yourself into these things, and use your own experiences as tools in the toolbox as an animator to change a scene, to change an expression, to plus something or add a gag that, maybe something that actually happened to you is you're going to put into the show. That's happened many times. Yeah.
Genuinely a piece of the creator's spirit. It gets woven into the fabric of their
Yeah.
work, and in turn, that becomes a part of the childhood of millions. And that personal mark is like, I think it's like the heartbeat of the entire story. And that's what makes these characters maybe feel less like drawings and more like the friends that we grow up with as well. They carry a spark of
Yeah,
being human with them.
absolutely. I think you're right. I think that's why Mickey and Friends has been so timeless. They're so relatable. Each character is relatable. Not only do we know people like each of them, but we are like each of, we're like all of them in a way. Sometimes we're like Goofy, sometimes we're like Donald, and we understand those feelings and those emotions, and some of the things that they say, we understand that we've been there.
Absolutely. And on that mirrorific note, it seems like the Mickey moment to spin our gears is here. Mr. Gordon, are you ready to race through the zippiest, the zaniest whirlwind of bits in the kingdom, the rapid fire round?
Absolutely. Let's have it.
Hot dog, let's go. So, Mr. Gordon, imagine if you could meet your younger self from 1988, right after you graduated from the University of Wisconsin. You can only show him one single storyboard panel from your entire 30
Oh
plus
my gosh.
career to inspire him and prove that he's on the right path. Which single image do you choose, like from Clifford to Mickey, and what one sentence do you tell him about the journey it represents?
That's a huge question, but the storyboard panel, oh my gosh, that's too big. I've literally drawn hundreds and hundreds, and not thousands of drawings. So to pick one out is just, I don't know. Um, uh, we, there's one that I can't tell you about because the show hasn't come out yet, and I didn't draw it, but the board artist who did, I absolutely love this image. I'll tell you, it's about Goofy. It's a show that's coming up, and it was animated so well in Bangalore, and it just blew my mind. I'm like, this is so well animated and is so well drawn. I was so happy with it. And the animation matches. There's an extreme amount of squash and stretch in it. And not only the drawing, but then the animation came in and it matched it beautifully. And it was so well done. So I can't tell you exactly what it is. But that one right now is the one that, I will point to other people and other animators and say, try to push things this far. And then the one sentence I would say about the journey, about my whole journey, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Um, if I told my one self, um, one sentence I would say is, "You are much more capable than you can possibly imagine."
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Endless possibilities
yeah,
for the magic inside you. And
yeah.
yes, we will keep our eyes peeled for Goofy's adventures. Now, Mr. Gordon,
Yes.
imagine you get a call from the studio heads at both Disney and Micah Productions. They want you to direct a feature length special where Piggly Winks from Jakers accidentally time travels and ends up in the world of Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. How will you direct the scene where Mickey, a globally recognized icon, tries to understand Pigly's thick Irish folklore? And what muscatoons would we see in
Oh,
1950s rural Ireland?
oh my gosh, these are amazing questions, and they're big. Uh, oh boy, how would I direct Mickey's reaction to Pigly's Irish folklore? Well, it would be, Mickey is curious, and very loving, so he would want to know everything about Piggly. He would be, it'd probably be his best friend because they're similar in a lot of ways. They're very relatable. Like I said, at the beginning, they're both everyman. Everyone can relate to them, and they want to be like them. Uh, I think that Piggly's got a little bit more spunk in him than our Mickey version, which I think that Mickey, because Mickey loves and accepts everybody, he would be fine with that, and he would still love Piggly. Um, maybe maybe Piggly would try to get him to do something, and he'd be like, "That wouldn't be nice enough." Like I said, Piggly's he can have some spunk to him. But he's also very similar. So I think they would be best pals. It would probably be some kind of buddy feature, like uh, they would be best buddies and go on a big adventure together. The Mouse Tools from 1950s Ireland. Oh boy. they'd probably have to have one of those. I forgot what they're called. A very specific kind of sweater. It's like the one that Piggly wears. Um, since Piggly lives on a farm, there might be some kind of maybe Wiley the sheep would be the mouse capel. Um, a tool might be a shovel. They'd probably have to dig up something. And the last tool, maybe I bring something from Disney's, from Mickey's world. Maybe Mickey's Roadster would be really fun to have in 1950s Ireland.
Well, that sounds like a wonderful crossover, and I really wish we get to see it happening on our screens.
I do too.
Well,
Why don't you write them both a letter and see what you can do?
that's a great idea, and yes, we will surely think about it. Well, all right. For another ultimate crossover, imagine that the Care Bears decide to become pirates for an episode. They sail to Neverland and they try to use their signature Care Bear stare on Captain Hook's crew from Captain Jake and the Neverland Pirates. So, as the director of both the franchises, does the stare work on cynical pirates? And what lesson about teamwork and problem solving can Captain Jake teach the Care Bears?
Oh my gosh, you're taking me way back. I don't even remember what the stare is anymore on the Care Bears. What remind me what happens? What happens in the Care Bear stare?
It'll be like this.
But does the stare do something? I don't honestly don't remember. It's been so long since I've worked on that show. Um, does it work? Yeah, of course it could. You could get it to work. Yeah, definitely. That's the beauty of animation. And as a director, is like you said, a lot of times we do have to merge two different worlds or merge characters that don't normally go together. And there's always a way. That's the one thing I tell people when they ask me about how to get into animation, and they want some advice. You have to be willing and to not only be ready to solve problems, but really enjoy it, because that's where the fun is. And so to solve a problem that doesn't seem possible, like you can't do, that cannot be done, right? If you hear somebody say that, well, that doesn't work, that can't be done, there's probably a way to do it. And that's a good lesson in life, not just animation, is to have that. It's not even it's more than a positive attitude, because it calls for action. um, Positive attitude is one thing, but making something work is action. And that is good in life, and it's great in animation. I love making things work that don't, especially when somebody says that you can't do that. And
Absolutely. And
so
I
we can
think,
do it. Yeah.
yes, and empathy and strategy, empathy from the Care Bears and strategy from Captain Hook. They have to
Yeah.
work together to win the day. Well, Mr. Gordon, that was an absolute thrill. To wrap up all our learnings from today's conversation, let's go ahead with our last segment, the Inspire segment.
Okay, let's do it.
Mr. Gordon, who or what has been your biggest inspiration in life and why?
Well, my biggest inspiration is probably my wife. She really encouraged me. And I think that's the reason I'm in animation. I've always wanted to do animation. I've always wanted to be a cartoonist. But to have someone, on my side, that not only encouraging, but willing to, you know, uh, to sacrifice, right? I grew up in Wisconsin, and she had a teaching job there, and she was teaching at a beautiful small school in Eagle, Wisconsin, and she loved it. She loved the kids. She loved the teachers, the administration. Everybody was really kind, and it was like this perfect little world that she, and that fit her personality perfectly. But she saw that I wanted something else, and I had this dream to go to California and become an animator. And so to have someone uh, willing to sacrifice what, was important to them and what they loved, for me, that, I can't ask for anything more than that. So when I came here, I wanted to make it work to kind of honor her, and it was for myself as well. Of course, that's what I wanted my whole life. But I just felt like she did so much for me and sacrificed so much that it's really important that I give it everything I have. And if it doesn't work, well, it didn't work, and I did the best I could. But things turned out really well for me, much better than I could have imagined, and it never would have without having someone not only inspire me daily, but uh, in life in general. I mean, she's just a wonderful person, and with a very high ethical moral code, and she inspires me more than probably anybody.
That's a beautiful answer, Mr. Gordon. And a huge shout out to Mrs. Gordon.
Yeah.
Do EDUheroes creating a better world for children around the world.
Thank
Thank
you
you
for
so much,
that.
Mr. Gordon.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Those are great questions. You guys did an excellent job of whittling and condensing everything down and packing everything in. That was intense.
Yes. And we do have two more questions left.
Okay.
So, okay. So,
Yeah.
what words of inspiration were given to you that you would like to pass along to others?
People, one of the things that people always say is follow your heart, right? And that's always the go-to answer that someone's going to give. I'm not going to tell you to do that, because your heart can be wrong. First of all, I'm a Christian and I believe in God, and I think for me that's number one in my life, and it's very important. But words of inspiration are to find what you're really good at, what you enjoy, and put every effort you can into doing those things, even if it's at the smallest level. When I started, I would say, drawing professionally, first of all, I graduated with an art degree. My first job out of college was a graphic design firm, and so I designed, and did the graphic art for potato bags, paintbrush wrappers. I mean, really kind of, you know, this is not going to be the highlight of my career. I knew it, but it was a really good learning experience, and it's a job that's important and needs to get done, and we need artists to do that. And so I felt really good about having the job and doing the job and trying to do it the best I could, and using that as a stepping stone to the next thing. And so I met someone at that job who moved to California and got a job in animation. So he was living the dream I wanted, and he knew that. And so he inspired me and called me and said, "You need to come out here. They're hiring at Warner Brothers." But by the time I got there, they weren't hiring really so much. The industry had cooled off a little bit. And plus, I don't know if my portfolio was good enough yet anyway. So, but he introduced me to someone who really inspired me and encouraged me to keep sending him work and try to improve my drawing. So I went back to Wisconsin, but I kept mailing Alfred Gimeno all these drawings, and he would, I would call him and say, "Oh, did you get my packet of drawings? What'd you think?" And he would tell me what was right, what was wrong, and how I can improve. And that's, and I was a good student. I wanted to know. I was never offended, like, oh, like artists can sometimes be very defensive, and you can't do that in this industry. You have to learn from, especially people that are much better than you, right? And I knew that there were a lot of people that were much better than me. That's why I wanted to get to learn. That's why I wanted to get in the industry. I wanted to get better. So having that student mentality your whole life is important, to keep learning, and to get back to the other thing is, after I worked at that graphic arts place, at the same time, actually, I got a job doing additional job doing editorial cartoons for a couple of small newspapers. One was the Walworth County Register, and one was the Economowoc Enterprise. But they were cartoons, and I was drawing cartoons and getting paid to do it. Not much, but I was getting paid to draw cartoons, and it was just such good practice, and it challenged me because they were not, at the beginning, it was not easy to do, and I really struggled with some of the compositions, and the ideas are always hard to come by. It was challenging, but I parlayed that into just getting better. just improving my drawing. And that's what I did. So take my advice is to keep at it. Take any job that comes your way, but use it as a stepping stone for the next thing and to improve. I always have to have that improve yourself mindset. And you just never know where that's going to lead. If I hadn't gotten that job at the graphic arts place, I wouldn't have met my friend Joe. If I didn't meet my friend Joe, I wouldn't have met Alfred. If I didn't meet Alfred, I wouldn't have gotten into Warner Brothers. So you just never know where life's going to take you. Take advantage of everything that comes your way, even if you think it's not the direction you want to go. If it can be used to get you to the next place, then don't worry about it. Just do it.
Absolutely. Just do it. Be the best version of yourself. Dream big. Never give up. And honestly, the words you spoke, I couldn't have phrased it better. Thank you so much for saying that, Mr. Gordon.
Yes.
And lastly, could you give us a call to action? What can young people do to make the world a better place?
You know, the second commandment that Jesus gave was to love one another. And there's nothing more important than that as a society, whether you believe in God or not. If you love your neighbor as yourself, if you truly love them, it doesn't matter who they are, what their race is, what they've done to you. Maybe, you can hate someone, right? We're human. We want to hate people when they're mean to us. But if we truly love one another as ourselves, it's a challenge that is extremely difficult. But that is the only way to truly make the world a better place. It's the only solution to me.
Absolutely. Love matters. Stepping into others' shoes and looking at the world that they see through their eyes, that's what makes
Absolutely.
the world a better place. Mr.
Absolutely.
Gordon, this entire conversation has felt like a look into the animator studio's life itself. And we see the characters on the screen, but like your journey has shown us that the humans behind them, how a single drawing they can become a global friendship, and how the values which are embedded in children's television, kindness, collaboration, and creativity, that is so much more needed for building a better world. Thank you so very much for joining us today and showing us that the courage to create new worlds, it begins with simple curiosity and lots of exploration, and to see the good in ones around us and the ones that we have right now.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was really fun talking with you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gordon. And to our listeners, we hope that this episode has inspired you to pay attention to the stories that has shaped you and to think about the stories that you want to tell. Remember the lesson from Mr. Gordon's work. Every character, no matter how small, has an important role to play. Your story matters as well. So you can check out Mr. Gordon's magical website, giving a peek into Disney's television's animations, as well as explore the world of animated films at Disney Animation. Both links in the show notes, and I can't believe we are finally getting Zootopia too. Yay! And to deepen your knowledge of everything STEM, sustainability, and education, subscribe to the SDG Warriors podcast for in-depth discussions and meaningful conversations with real-world change makers and edu heroes like Mr. Gordon, who are shaping a better world one frame at a time. If you love this episode, help others discover it by leaving a review and sharing it with your friends, teachers, and family. Remember, if you can dream it, you can do it. Stay curious and be the change. Until next time, it's bye from the SDG Warriors.
Thank you.